How's it going, Diablo players? So I'm showing you my Hydra Familiar Firewall leveling build. This is a burning damage leveling build, and this is clearly from doing like level 1 to level 60, and it can do your first pit tiers up to like Torment 2. And it's also great to do your first tormented bosses and get yourself that juicy fractured winterglass you need to transition into my early game Frozen Orb build there. So this is clearly an early game build which you want to transition out into something like my early game Frozen Orb build, which is also linked in the description down below. So how does this build work? We basically just stack a bunch of conjurations, we use Hydras, we use Familiars, we use Conjuration Mastery, because we can have a lot of conjurations up at a time. On top of that, we even use the Hydra enchantment, because that has recently been buffed, that the Hydras also last 10 seconds. So we can just get a lot of conjurations, which gives us a good amount of mana regeneration from Conjuration Mastery. It gives us a lot of movement speed, which is great when you're in the early leveling phase, because movement speed is essentially everything. And it also has great damage, since burning damage scales very good early on, but falls off once you enter the mid game. This is the leveling build I'm playing in Season 6, and you can catch me live on launch day. The planner of the build and the specific sections are as always in the description down below. So without further ado, let's go into the skill tree. I divided the skill tree into two sections. So the first section is level 1 to 35, and you can see it on the Mobalytics page here. This tab says level 1 to 35, and this is 35 to 60. So the level 1 to 35 is basically you're gonna rush towards your key passive as soon as possible. So we start with Arclash, and this is just your first skill you're gonna use to kill like your first 10 mobs or something like that, so you've got to be just fine. And then we go for Fireball into Enhanced Fireball and Greater Fireball. This is really just to reach the next skill set, so you need 2 points in Fireball here. Then we get 1 into Flame Shield, 1 into Teleport, and 3 into Glass Cannon. This is really just, we want the damage, and we just need Teleport here. All the other skills, we don't really care. For the early phase, we will not have any issues staying alive. Then we go for 1 into Hydra, into Summoned Hydra. We go for Familiar into Invoked Familiar here for the extra damage. We go for Lightning Spear into Enhanced Lightning Spear. And we go for Max Conjuration Mastery. Then we go Firewall into Enhanced Firewall. We're not choosing Mage's Firewall or Wizard's Firewall yet. Remember, this is the level 1 to 35 version, so we just want to reach the important passives as fast as possible. So that being said, next thing is we're going to go 3 into Fury Surge. This is going to enable a lot of mana regeneration for us, so this is very important. Get these points as soon as you can, then get cooldown reduction. Then we get the elemental synergies here, because we're going to have almost only fire skills on our bar, so this is actually a pretty significant damage boost. And early on, we're not going to play Enlightenment, and this is not going to be active a whole lot, unless you have like crazy amounts of cooldown reduction, which you're not going to have leveling. Instead, we just go for Combustion. This gives a big buff to burning damage, and is definitely the best key passive you can choose for like an early leveling build. Then for the second version, which is going to be the level 35 to 61, we still go for 2 into Arclash, and then 2 into Fireball, into Greater Fireball. We put 1 point into Flame Shield, 1 into Teleport, 3 into Glass Cannon, 1 into Elemental Attunement. Now it makes sense to reset our defensive skills, and 3 into Energy Focus. So early game, you're gonna have a hard time getting Barrier, and this definitely helps to just get you a little bit of Barrier to, for example, use like a Conceited Aspect here. We still don't need like these defensive skills here. Then we max out Hydra into Summoned Hydra, we max out Familiar into Invoked Familiar, we get all the defensive passives here, we still get Conjuration Mastery, and we finally get the Invoked Lightning Spear, so it stuns. So very early, you don't want to get Invoked Lightning Spear, because it's gonna prevent mobs from running towards you, but later on, if mobs actually do damage, it kind of helps to get the Invoked Lightning Spear here. And then we put 3 into Inner Flames here for just some more burning damage. We max out Firewall into Mage's Firewall. We don't really need the mana regeneration from Wizard's Fireball, but if you see yourself running out of mana, definitely switch from Mage's Firewall to Wizard's Firewall here. And then we max out, after Fury Surge, we max out all our passives here. So Worms gives a very nice amount of survivability, and these passives here just give a ridiculous amount of burning damage. And we're still gonna play our Combustion. For the skills, it's pretty much the same in the 1 to 35 and the 35 to 60 variant here. So we're gonna use Hydra and Familiar, and we spam those on cooldown. And then Firewall, in the early game, you don't want to spam Firewall. You're just going to use it for the extra burning damage. So as long as a mob is burning from Firewall, it's going to take 30% extra burning damage. So we don't spam this. We mainly just use these two skills. And obviously Lightning Spear on cooldown. And, Teleport and Flame Shield is just for moving around or like getting a little bit extra survivability here. Then we use Fireball enchantment as always. And I have the Hydra enchantment here. This slot is kind of optional. You don't really need it at all. You can also play like a familiar enchantment. It really doesn't matter all that much. But I feel like the Hydra enchantment is a pretty nice buffed enchantment now, since the Hydras also last for the full duration. And then what changes to the level 35 to 60? Well, we just max out these 3 skills, and other than that, nothing really changes. So as soon as you're like, level 40-ish or something, you can definitely spam your Firewall and, use the Hydras and the Familiars here to do your main damage. So before we go into the actual gear priorities, there's just one little thing I want to highlight here, that certain stats are very irrelevant before you reach item level 590. So let's take a look at the armor pieces here, for example. So on level 589, which is probably like somewhere around level 50, you have 18 maximum life. You have 92 armor and you have 2 mana per second. Just comparing the 18 maximum life to the 141 maximum life temper is already pretty much showing you that maximum life is an irrelevant stat. So you don't really want to look for stats early on whatsoever at all. If you want to look for stats, it's going to be armor, mana per second, or resistances. That is pretty much the best you can get early on. So let's compare this 589 variant to the 590 variant. So by getting to item level 590, your maximum life jumps from 18 to 60. So that's like a ×3. Your maximum armor pretty much doesn't really change all that much, and mana per second also stays the same. So basically, before you are level 590, don't look for maximum life, and also don't look for intelligence. So let's look at the bottom here. So this is the ring with 589. As you can see, attack speed is pretty stable. Damage over time is pretty stable. Intelligence is not. It's not doubling, but it's a good 75% or something like that. And compared to the temper here, for example, fire damage, this intelligence stat is not going to matter all that much, so you don't really need to look for it. So this 38 intelligence is a 4% damage, and it's really, really, compared to your base intelligence, which is somewhere around like 300 or 400 intelligence, this really doesn't do anything at all. So just look for flat armor values, look for values like 2 mana per second, but most likely just, upgrade your armor pieces when you reach more item power, because armor is very important in the early game. Armor is pretty much a bottleneck, and mobs can kill you if you have not enough armor, so pretty much watch for that. Don't look for maximum life and intelligence values. So for the items, again, in the level 1 to 35, as just explained, we're really not looking for intelligence or maximum life. So what are we going to look for is mana per second and armor rolls. If we can pick up an aspect of disobedience, that's almost nice. Your temper is going to be bonus to maximum life. There's a second one, bonus to worms, on here. You can definitely get these as well. It helps, so you can kind of mix and match maximum life and worms temper. The second temper, the utility, just forget about it. Like before level 35, you're not gonna need the utility temper whatsoever. Then for chest piece, same story, mana per second, armor, and I have lightning resistance on here, for example, but really don't worry about those stats all that much. And if you can pick up a Wildbolt aspect, it definitely helps a little bit pulling in mobs. Then for gloves, you want to try to get damage over time and armor or attack speed, something around that. Offensive, try to temper fire damage. Pyromancy attack speed is also alright for a temper, and really try to pick up Serpentine aspect. It really, really helps a lot. And then for our pants, aspect of the protector is really nice early on, because we're having trouble generating barrier early on, so this really helps. Again, try to get armor and resistance. I have life per second on here, it doesn't even matter at all. And for tempers, again, try defensive, maximum life, or bonus to worms. For boots, the Tenuous agility is really nice because it gives you flat movement speed. So if you can get that aspect, it's very nice. Again, mana per second is nice. Movement per speed is nice. And, I have another resistance on here, which is just a random stat. And then try to temper movement speed, mobility, or movement speed after killing an elite mobility aspect. Then for a weapon, we want to have a 200 weapon, which is going to be a stuff because it gives us the damage over time implicit. And you want to try to get damage over time and damage and maybe mana on kill or something like that. Again, it doesn't really matter all that much. And you want to definitely try to get Hydra heads priority. And if you get the Hydra heads, good for you. You can put fire damage on as a secondary temper. Just try to get Hydra heads. That's the primary one there. Then for our amulet, I have Battlecaster's Aspect on here because I just play 2 resource aspects here on my rings. So if you can get Battlecaster's Aspect, it definitely helps to put it on like somewhere. I have movement speed, total armor, ranks to Conjuration Mastery. Ranks to Conjuration Mastery, definitely the best you could pick up on an amulet early on. But don't sweat these stats at all. And for tempo on your amulet, movement speed is definitely the best you can get. And for our rings, both rings we want to have the same stuff. Damage over time, damage and or mana on kill. Again, don't worry about maximum life or intelligence. And you want to try to get familiar duration as a primary temper. So the resource temper familiar duration, if you have it, very nice. Other than that, you can get offensive fire damage. If you don't have those tempers, not a big deal. But usually you find those tempers very early on. And Starlight Aspect, definitely in the 1 to 35, you're gonna heal a lot of life, so Starlight Aspect definitely helps. We also have the aspect of Elemental Acuity. I don't know how it plays out, but I assume it gives a good chunk of mana regeneration, so if you can pick that up, it's also going to be very nice as well. And also for the second ring, we have same tempers, try to get familiar duration and fire damage. Then in the second variant here is our level 35 to 60 itemization. So here it changed because this itemization shows basically items once you reached item level 590. This is not going to be at level 35. This might be at level 40 or 50 or something like that. Just for reference, if you're not level 590 on the items yet, you just jump back to the itemization of level 1 to 35. But yeah, we still want to try to pick up aspect of disobedience. We want to try to pick up cooldown reduction, armor, and maximum life. And defensive temper, again, we want to get bonus to worms. If you want to get a second utility temper, you can definitely get barrier generation. That's the most useful of all of them at this stage. Then again, we try to get Wildbolt aspect, and we want to have maximum life, armor, and mana per second on our chest piece. Again, temper, maximum life, and barrier generation. Then on our gloves, we want to have damage over time, armor, and attack speed, just like before. Try to temper fire damage and barrier generation, and we want to have the serpentine aspect. For our pants, we want to get aspect of concentration now for a little bit damage reduction. Again, try to get armor, maximum life, and I have Ores on here. Ores is always nice. So in the early game, you're gonna have trouble getting your armor and resistance maxed out. So this is the most useful stats you can pick up on these items, in my opinion. And again, we have maximum life temper and barrier generation temper. For our boots, we still play the Tenuous Agility for the extra movement speed. Again, try to pick up mana per second, movement speed, maximum life. And for the temper, definitely try to get movement speed. And again, I have barrier generation on here. For a weapon, it's still the same stuff, damage over time, but now we have maximum life and damage pretty much. Maximum life at item level 590 on a 2 weapon gives quite a bit. And again, try to get Hydra heads and fire damage. For the amulet, still try to get ranks of Conjuration Mastery, total armor this time, and cooldown reduction. We want to have familiar duration and maximum life, and the conceded aspect, since we can actually generate a good amount of barrier now. Then we want to have the Battlecaster's Aspect still on our second ring. We want to have damage over time, maximum life, attack speed, and again, fire damage, familiar duration. And the other ring, we still play the aspect of Elemental Acuity. Damage over time, maximum life, attack speed, fire damage, familiar duration, all the same stuff. And I forgot to say, on your stuff, you want to have the aspect of Engulfing Flames. This is definitely the strongest aspect for damage over time. But if you don't have these aspects, throw any kind of damage-related aspect on there. You're going to be just fine. For the Paragon, this is a very early game build, so we are not taking into account a lot of Paragon points, and we're also not taking into account any kind of glyphs. So we mainly focus on these nodes, which give us additive damage bonuses, because these have been buffed pretty nicely. So On the starter board, we get all these non-physical damage nodes. We get these non-physical damage node and, this ones. And if you can get an Elementalist glyph or any kind of glyph on level 1, which gives you like a multiplicative damage bonus, good, and use it. If you don't have it, just don't use a glyph at all. And then you want to make your way over to the Burning Instinct board and pick the Burning Instinct node. If you have some amount of intelligence, you can get like roughly 90% with this fairly easily. And then you want to make your way over to the cluster here in the middle, which gives crit damage. That is also going to boost your Burning Instinct. And you want to get these even more crit damage and burning damage nodes here. And again, if you can slot in a glyph like Tactician, which does something good for you, if not, don't use the glyph at all. And I just have one more board here. You can pass over to the Fundamental Release for another multiplier because, you get a free 30% here and then you get a good chunk of additive damage here. This is pretty much, the boards I would approach very, very early on if you really have nothing. So just start here, get all these damage nodes, pass over to Burning Instinct, get damage here, get damage in the middle, get even more damage, and then pass over to Fundamental Release and get some more additive damage. At this point, you probably already would have transitioned into a Frozen Orb build or something else. For the mercs, we definitely want to take Subo. That seems to be the strongest merc whatsoever. First of all, in the early game, it marks all materials and mobs on the map, which is going to be pretty nice. And it's also gonna, mark a mob with like a, crosshair above its head. And killing that mob will restore 50% maximum resource, which is huge early game. And it's also gonna reduce the cooldown for the Seeker to happen again for 10 seconds. So this is a very, very strong ability. And then we go for the Molotov because it, gives us extra burning damage together with the Scorched Earths. So we have 30% extra damage over time for like 3 seconds. I know it's not huge, but then we go for like Snipe, which does a good amount of damage, and then we go for the Incendiary Bolt because it's gonna explode a Molotov then again, and that is basically gonna give us another 30% damage over time boost. And then for the support one here, for the reinforcement, I don't even know which one is going to be good, honestly. I'm probably going to just pick one which does a lot of burning damage because I assume that's going to get boosted by the burning damage stats on our gear and Paragon. So we use Alkin with Storm of Fire, which is this ultimate ability, and we just put it on Firewall. So I assume that is how it's going to play out. I don't know exactly, but this is a leveling build, so it's likely not going to matter all that much. Alright, so if you finish the leveling phase, next up is going to be transitioning into a mid-game farming build. And the best mid-game farming build is most likely going to be the pure Frozen Orb build. And I have a Frozen Orb leveling build for you put together, which doesn't really require any gear whatsoever, except for the Fractured Winterglass. So as soon as you are done with your burning familiar Hydra build, just get yourself some Lord Zerans, like go to the group finder, get a group for like Torment 2 probably would be a good approach to start with. And, just get the Winterglass Amulet. It doesn't really matter at all. Just get any one. The stats are completely irrelevant. Well, they're not completely irrelevant, but for playing a starter build, they actually are. And then you basically want to transition as soon as you have like 750 item level gear. And, if you're looking for the build, you can find it on the screen right now. And it's also in the description down below. And that's it for my Hydra Familiar Firewall leveling guild. I hope you liked the guide. Make sure to catch me live on launch day, and thank you so much for watching, and I see you guys next time.